All right, good morning and welcome to our final session of our 2020 Virtual National Student Parent Support Symposium. My name is Stephanie Fields. I am the CCAMPIS Program Coordinator for the Access Collaborative Program, and I would like to thank all of you for joining us this entire week and especially this day. Before we get started, if you have not had the opportunity to join us in our prior sessions, I would like to briefly share with you about a little bit about our Access program at OSU. The Access Collaborative Program is an academic and social support program that assists parenting students at The Ohio State University. We offer a variety of services to our students, and those services include programming for parenting and social skills, housing assistance, scholarship opportunities, and childcare. Since 2005, our program has organized and offered the National Student Parent Support Symposium with the purpose of bringing together students, community, higher education professionals to discuss best practices when supporting post-secondary parenting students and their families. The SPSS focuses on how to empower this unique college population while helping them overcome barriers that may prevent them from graduating. Although this is an abbreviated and virtual version of the SPSS, we hope that you will still be able to be just impacted just as much. With that being said, I have the pleasure to introduce our speaker for today's session. Today we have Haley Dillon Myers. Haley is the director of the Parent and Family Program at Sacramento State. Haley will briefly walk us through the CCAMPIS grant, shed light on any changes or impacts this program has had on the COVID pandemic, and offer suggestions for alternative ways to utilize funding in light of campus changes. Take it away, Haley. We welcome you to the session.
Thanks, Stephanie. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining. As I said before, wish we were in Ohio. So I want to tell you a little bit about how I work and how this conversation is going to work. And then I'll share a PowerPoint for you to follow along. So I'm a pretty casual presenter, and I know that we all have a lot of questions. I've made the presentation I think it's fairly short. I've also invited a few other campus project directors to talk about their experiences. So I'm gonna roll through what we do at Sacramento State, a little background on our program, and we will have ample time at the end for questions. This is really going to be a discussion-oriented session. And at the end, I've created a Slack channel that we should all be able to access with the hope of creating a national network for us, because the reason that this session started is I asked when I got the CCAMPIS grant, I asked if I could have names and contact information for other administrators across the country, and the U.S. Department of Education wouldn't give me the names. And, you know, as with anything, I think, oh, I'm not the only person doing this. Someone has been doing this before. Even in writing the grant, I needed a lot of help in the application. And I know there's a number of you on this session who don't have the grant yet. So let's create that network, and we'll do it via Slack. There's a couple places in the presentation that I show it to you. And okay, so now I will start our presentation. Okay. So my name is Haley Myers Dillon. I am the director of the Parents and Families program at Sac State. And I want to tell you a little bit about, let me adjust my Zoom really quick because I can't see. Tell you a little bit about the program. So I work at Sacramento State, which is a large public institution in California. We're part of the CSU system, which is a 23 campus system. I have been working with students who have children since 2015, but I was actually hired in 2012 to start this program called the Parents and Families Program. And initially it was intended to serve only the parents of the students. So this would be, you know, traditional mom and dad of traditional student coming in who's nervous about their 18-year-old. But after working in orientation for 3 years and seeing these students come up to my table and say, oh, do you have services for students who have children? I had 3 years of saying, no, I don't. And I just thought, that's unacceptable. I have to figure out how to serve students who have children. So in 2015, I asked a question. And for those of you who don't have the CCAMPIS grant yet, you'll know this question. Actually, everyone on this session probably knows this question. How many students have kids at Sac State? And that was a really difficult number to find. And it actually took me 3 years to find that number for the first time. And I've only received that number, I'm going to say 3 times. So yeah, it takes a long time. That was the beginning of getting data and realizing how challenging it was to get data. I am the project director of the CCAMPIS grant. I also wrote the grant, and we are currently in our 2nd year of our award cycle. We have, at Sac State, we have 3,675 students with children. We're a campus of about 30,000, and so that's 12% of our population. About 76% of our students are on financial aid, and it turns out this was really important to how we got our data. 77% of those students who have kids are Pell eligible. So we were able to get a lot of data from the financial aid office, and I'll talk more about that in a bit. So that's some background on where Sac State is coming from. As I mentioned, I want this to be a discussion-based sharing session. We really need our network, and I'm only in year 2 of our grant, so I'm certainly not the expert. I did thank you to all of you who filled out the survey. I can see all your questions, and I reviewed them and worked them into the presentation as well. But we wanted to do a live poll. Jillian, can you help me understand with a live poll who is currently working at an institution that receives the CCAMPIS grant? Okay, so we've got our numbers coming in. And it looks like of the people on the call, we'll wait a minute. I know some people are from community organizations, so those are probably the not applicable responses. It looks like just more than a third have had the CCAMPIS grant for more than 1 cycle, which is great. Those people are our experts. I hope you'll talk with us as we continue, especially when we share best practices at the end. And then a number of those, also about a third that's on their first cycle and about a third that have not received the grant. Okay, that's really helpful. Okay, so we're going to speak to, definitely be speaking to those of you who don't have the grant for a moment and just do a basic overview of what CCAMPIS is, and maybe some questions you'll have about your data.
Haley, can I ask you just a quick question? Because it's like something they kind of piled it up real quick. How did you get your number of students that you serve? Was it just from the FAFSA for the financial aid?
I'm going to go into that in a moment on our next slide.
Gotcha.
But since you asked, no, it wasn't just through financial aid. So the other piece, so the actual number that we put in our report, yes, that number was from financial aid, but they ask for a lot of data, including survey data. And so I meet students at orientation every summer, and this summer will be interesting because it's virtual. We'll see what happens. But building that relationship when overwhelmingly 98% of our students who have children are transfer students, they're transferring in from a community college. And so I meet them in person and I have them sign up in person. I have them fill out a hard copy little card. It can be done electronically too, but I find that when people hand over something in hard copy, it does something in their memory where they remember that they signed up for a program, or they'll remember in a month or two, oh yeah, there's a service for me, where if it's just electronic, they forget it and there's no relationship built. And so I collect data that I'll use later, like how many children they have, what ages are their children. If they're interested in something we do called peer matching, where we'll match two student parents who might live in the same region or might have the same number of children, we'll match them together. And I would be willing to share that on the Slack channel for anyone that wants to use that sign up, whether it's electronic or hard copy. It's really simple, but it works. And it's not just at orientation, it's any event where I might be encountering students who have children. I bring those little cards in our program materials. Okay, Jillian, I'm gonna stop sharing the polling results. Okay, so for those of you who are trying to figure out what how to get this award, I thought I'd take it back to the fundamental mission, which I've actually come back to a number of times as I've had to revise and pivot and innovate with this grant. What are these funds used for? What's allowable, right? So as we're thinking about COVID and we're thinking about what's happening, what's allowable? What are these funds for? Funds are used to establish, support or establish campus-based childcare programs, primarily serving the needs of low-income students enrolled in an institution. CCAMPIS program funds can be used either to directly provide childcare service or contract for the provision of childcare services. Grants may be used before or after school services. So this is important for me because I work in student affairs, and I do not work at a childcare center. So I am not in a I don't know how to operate a childcare center. And that was something that we had to navigate. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. So CCAMPIS funds are distributed to each campus. When I got our award was $134,000 a year for 4 years. I was so excited and I thought, how did we get that number? And it turns out it's not based on merit. Like, it's not based on how good your application was or anything like that. It's based on the number of Pell students at your campus. So you should be able to get that number from financial aid because Pell is a federal financial award. Pell mostly applies only to undergraduate students. There are some scenarios where it applies to certificated or students pursuing a teaching credential. But for the most part, it's just undergrads. So, I was along the lines of thinking, oh, we have a lot of grad students who are going to need services. They have children. This grant does not help them. And that was not a great place for me to market services. So just thinking about that, who is your market? In 2019, across the CCAMPIS, there were 266 projects with an annual average budget of $159,000 per campus. I found this interesting. So this information is on the U.S. Department of Education CCAMPIS website. The smallest award was $14,000 to Slippery Rock University in Pennsylvania, which is, $14,000. What are they doing with that? Who knows, unless you're on the call. And then the largest award was more than $500,000, so $563,000 for Universidad del Turbado in Puerto Rico, and that's significant funds. So there's a range. Okay, so before we delve into some of the details and the questions, just wanted to do a reminder of who are these people? And these are some of the clients that I've worked with at Sac State. And I do think of them as my clients. I see it as my job to help them navigate their time at college to degree. And I think that's because I work in student affairs. I don't work at a children's center. And why are we doing this? I think the why is really important as you hit these frustrating blocks trying to apply for a grant, or maybe what you were planning didn't work out.
Rinse your toothbrush, you're done.
Oh, we have someone on the line who's not muted. A survey of Sac State students. So we did a few surveys. I think we did 3 surveys leading up to the grant application. And this was important because when I have that relationship with them and I got that purple card that they fill out in person, they would see an email coming from me instead of maybe some mass account like the university name, or even my constant contact system, which is kind of anonymous. When I send them surveys from me, they respond more, and that helps. That helps get a higher response rate. So at Sac State, our student parents, one survey showed that 50% of respondents do not have adequate time to study, and 61.5% of respondents reported the inability to find childcare so they could study was a major barrier that hindered academic achievement. And that's no surprise to you who work with students who have kids. So a little bit about Sac State. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I'm not there yet. Who responded? I want to let you know who's on this call or who's on this meeting, and how we, what kind of informed this presentation. So I'm calling it like who's in the room right now. I want you to know, because this is going to be our network. So we had, when I was preparing my presentation, we had 28 respondents. As of this morning, we actually had about 40 respondents, and I have those up now for the updates. So we saw earlier that we've got 1/3 of people on the call who have the grant, actually 2/3. Many people wanted to know how to get CCAMPIS funds, or creative ways that the funding could be used. There's our Slack channel through Sac State Parents and Families, #CCAMPIS20. You can join that, and we'll be uploading documents. I am going to share the grant application that I submitted, and I'm hoping that some of our other project directors are willing to share their grant applications. So before, I asked in this survey, before COVID-19, how were you using the funds? And most people were doing 2 things. They were either offering childcare on campus during regular business hours, or they were offering vouchers or a subsidy program where they're basically providing funding for students who have kids to get childcare at a licensed facility or an in-home childcare center. A few campuses were also offering nighttime care or Saturday care. And another respondent was offering parent training events. So that's different. That's interesting. After coronavirus and sheltering in place, CCAMPIS service offerings and our expenses look different, don't they? I think we're all having a hard time drawing down this money. So 6 of our campuses that responded are still offering vouchers. Sac State is still offering vouchers to those childcare centers that are open, right? A lot have not been. 6 have suspended CCAMPIS services altogether. 1 respondent is using it to pay a coordinator salary. Another is providing support and resources to students with children. That seems appropriate and great. I think there's lots of ways we could do that. And then another is offering virtual learning opportunities, but there are some caveats to that. And I'm going to let her talk about that in a moment. So I'd like to have our practitioners share a little bit about how things went for them. And we're going to hear from Karen Knott at UMass Amherst. We're going to hear from Denise Gabrielski from Cincinnati State Technical and Community College. And we're going to hear from Sally Dionisio from Bergen Community College in New Jersey. And I know one of our panelists has a celebration for her child. Is that you, Denise? Okay, so we.
Yes, that's me.
Okay,
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Had to unmute there.
Denise, why don't you go ahead and go first so we can hear from you and you can get on to your graduation.
Okay. So I know I had a lot to share with you in email, so I'm not sure if you want me to highlight anything in particular or just talk.
I think if you can share what your history has been, where your campus is at right now.
All right, so we're finishing our second year in our first cycle. The grant was written before I was hired, excuse me, to be the parent resource manager. And originally the grant was written to cover the lag between the time that students apply for publicly funded child care assistance to the time that they actually started receiving assistance. Fortunately and unfortunately, since we received the grant was written well before we actually received it. Since that time, our state has streamlined that process and it's much more efficient. So that lag isn't really an issue. So that's actually a good thing. But at the same time, it's been making it difficult for us to spend the money the way that we thought we were going to. So basically our focus right now is we're in a tri-state area. So the other states around us aren't necessarily as efficient. So we're kind of funding those students. Another issue, which I know a lot of people face, is just the lack of quality child care spaces. We have a campus child care on campus, and our director, Shelly Bosco, is attending the session. And Shelly, please feel free to chime in if I'm missing anything. But we're nationally accredited, or I shouldn't say we, they're nationally accredited. They consistently receive the highest rating from the state, and obviously it's convenient for students. So it's very in demand, as are any other quality centers in our area. So even just the lack of spots is a huge challenge. So my biggest advice is before you apply for the grant or as you're writing the grant, make sure you're actually able to spend the money. And also that identifying students who are parents is a challenge at a lot of campuses, and Haley touched on that. And finally, I think I would say, ensure that you or somebody who's in your corner has seamless access to financial aid records, student academic records, as well as just general statistics for your campus and demographics, because you will need to report that to the Department of Education. And if you don't have that support, it's going to be hard for you to manage the grant. So is that where you're hopefully, I know I had other things that I emailed you about, but those are the highlights.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's great. Do you have any, let's see, do you have any takeaways or highlights that have been particularly like you would consider wins for your program?
Yeah, absolutely. We've had a couple of students who've actually been able to graduate either on time, where they didn't think they would have to postpone their graduation, and in one case even earlier than they thought, because these funds were made available for them. So the numbers are small, but they're mighty and significant. So the CCAMPIS grant also pays my salary. So I provide support for students who are not receiving the CCAMPIS grant directly. So I've been able to hire student workers who otherwise didn't have opportunities to work on campus, that are student parents. I have an online network. I have an in-person network for them. We have student-led peer groups for parenting support. And in COVID, it feels like a lot of our students have disappeared, but the ones who have reached out and connected with me or each other have been, they wouldn't have had that connection without the CCAMPIS grant and the development of the parent resource. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely wins. There's absolutely wins.
And tackling that sense of isolation for students who have kids is so crucial. I mean, they always feel isolated.
Yeah, and it's also good validation for them. And I think a really big overarching win is that students who are aware of our program, and that's also a challenge getting the word out because we don't necessarily know who our student parents are, but the students who do find out about our program, they get this sense that the college cares about them, cares about their family. They understand the challenges of being a student parent. And I think sometimes for some students, that's enough, just knowing that the college itself recognizes that they are a special part of the community. So yeah, definitely wins, definitely wins. CCAMP is definitely an amazing program.
It's helped our program tremendously. I mean, it launched me from basically feeling invisible to feeling visible on campus. Thank you so much, Denise. I hope you have a great time with your daughter.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Kara, do you care to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the CCAMPIS program at UMass Amherst?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I, like Denise, am in finishing program year or project year 2 of our first cycle of CCAMPIS, and I was also hired after the proposal was written and awarded. So I came in about a year ago, so April of the first year of our CCAMPIS program, and they had no coordinator. They were behind in disseminating funds, and so it was really playing catch up to be able to identify eligible recipients, get them acclimated to the program, and disperse funds. What I have learned in that process, I guess there are a number of things that I learned in that process. One is that as Denise mentioned, the relationship building of CCAMPIS, that as important as the funds are to paying childcare expenses, is the relationship that you build with the student parents. As you mentioned, the isolation is pretty profound. And for students who are already non-traditional students, older, first gen, most of them transfer students to UMass, they often feel like they question whether they belong in that first year. And so helping students build a connection to other student parents to increase visibility on campus, and that visibility includes faculty and staff recognizing that there are student parents on campus and recognizing that some of the ways in which they support them might be different from how they support other maybe traditional age undergraduate students or non-parenting grad students. So those relationships that you build through the disseminating of funds, our program's a little different in that while we do have on-campus childcare, most of our student parents send their kids to childcare in their communities. So most of our student parents don't live that close to campus. It's because of this huge undergraduate, 18 to 22-year-old age students, they're priced out of the Amherst area around our university. So they are living in communities that might be 45 minutes away, and it's much easier to have childcare in their community. And because most of them are transfer students, they already had established childcare close to perhaps where they went to community college. So while that's a challenge for our program administratively, trying to get all of the invoices and manage the subsidies to over 50 different childcare providers, it's, I think, a real asset to our program because student parents decide what's the right childcare venue for them and their child. Some prefer an in-home provider, small care, some it's a Head Start program, some it's a YMCA, it's after school or before school, at their school, vacation care at some place that's close to home or close to their school. So I think that's a real asset to our program that we can just respect what their choices are. And then there are enough childcare providers in our region to be able to accommodate all of their needs. Not always first choice, but there are enough providers in the area. So yeah, so the relationship building, the case management piece of it, I think the child care funding gets people in the door, but what we quickly realize is that's only one of the obstacles that student parents face at pursuing their educational goals. One of the things that I think we do really well in having a point person in your program who can manage this is alleviating some of the time burden. So, right, we know student parents have no time, have the least amount of just time to spend on things other than their primary needs. So if I can facilitate getting in touch with an advisor, clarifying some expectations, or checking on some financial aid questions, instead of having people run around to 4 different offices, and now just making phone calls and emails to those 4 offices, I can really get them over some humps and through some challenges really quickly. So that's one of the things that I think I've learned through this, is that the case management piece is as important as the subsidies for childcare. And then I think challenges, the administrative burden of having so many different providers, having a large decentralized university is a challenge. Just getting the word out about how best to support best practices and working with student parents to faculty, staff throughout the university, collaborating with different departments since we're new. I think that one of the assets and one of the things I would recommend is we have a CCAMPIS program, but we also have a department called Student Parent Programs that does programming and is a sort of a landing space for student parents here at the university. We have a child-friendly lounge so people can drop in. If they're meeting with an advisor, they can meet with their advisor here. So that, I think, also increases the sense of belonging here at the university for student parents. And then the challenge, like many of you, is and Haley, I can't wait to hear how you did this, is getting the numbers, really finding out and drilling down how many student parents do we have on campus, what are the profiles. We use financial aid data, but we know we're missing a lot of folks in that. And then advice for programs who are going into this. As someone who came in without any connections to other CCAMPIS, I take that back. We were really fortunate that we have one other CCAMPIS funded program in the state. Ann Reynolds is the director at Mount Wachusett CCAMPIS program. And she was such a wonderful mentor. So if you can reach out to other programs in your state, check in with how they do things, and your programs will be different, but you'll get a lot of support and a lot of information from that. But with that said, it was my first time doing the report, and our program is different from Ann's program. And so what I would advise people going into your first time doing the report is really read it carefully. There's so many questions that on first glance seem really obvious, and then you drill down into it and you say, oh, wait a minute, and then it's too late if you have to go back and get that data or figure out how to get it later, it's much more time consuming. So if at the beginning of your funding cycle, if you can look at the last year's report, really read it carefully, and then start to collect that data as you go, it's going to make it so much easier to do your report at the end.
I really have to echo so many of the things you said, Kara. How long did it take you to complete your report?
Well, I was fortunate in that I read it sort of soon after I came on board.
Oh, okay.
And frequently sent questions on to our DOE liaison. So it was probably about 2 weeks but most of that, and I was really fortunate, I lucked out. I reached out to a couple of you have to collect a lot of data about the centers that the children attend. And because we had over 50 childcare providers, you need a lot of details. And I was lucky enough to get someone at a national office or a state level office who could send me in a spreadsheet all of this data so I could easily transfer it. But if I didn't have that, it would have taken me at least a month.
It took me 2 months.
Oh.
So for those of you who are doing a report, 2 months.
Yeah. So, but if you can start to gather all your data ahead of time, and it's the first year, I think that's probably the worst, because many of those childcare providers are repeats. But I guess I started collecting data for it early on, months before. So I guess it was about a week to 2 weeks to finally compile it all. But the gathering of the data and making sure I had what I needed was an ongoing process throughout the year.
Yep. And one of the questions for those of you, one of the questions in the final report is about how long it has, if students are graduating, how long it took them, how many years they've been in school. And so for me, I had to manually go in and look up each student's record, and through kind of curiosity, I actually wasn't clear if I needed to look at their community college time as well, but I just wanted to know how, because, you know, we know the statistic, I think, which is it takes on average 12 or 14 years to complete a degree. And so looking up these students, I realized it is taking this long. It was really important human moment. Thank you so much for sharing, Kara. Absolutely, advocacy is, so when you talk about kind of helping the students, giving them a voice on campus, making them visible, helping faculty know how to respond to students who have children, I call that advocacy. I think it's very important. What you say is alleviating the time burden. I call that helping them navigate the bureaucracy. And I do that too. Just kudos to a great program, and it sounds like you're doing a wonderful job, and it's really nice to hear from you. Thanks, Kara. Sally, I saw you earlier.
I'm here.
Hi, Sally. Do you mind
Hi.
telling us a bit about your program? And
No, not at all. Okay, I'm from Bergen Community College, which is in Paramus, New Jersey. Oh, okay, hold on. And we are in the first year of our CCAMPIS grant, and we applied last May and actually was not approved the first time. So we redid it in, I believe, in August, and when we were approved and received it September 30th. Now, I was fortunate. I had the grants department help me write it, and the grant writer. So whatever data he needed from me, so we wrote it together. And we also were fortunate because we got a lot of the data from a department called Instructional Research. So they had a lot of the facts that we needed, and things like student demographics, the population, their income status, how many preschool children were in the county and enrolled in preschools, things like that. How many students have children? As you said, you were looking for that data for 3 years. And how many receive childcare subsidies from the state. So that was some of the data that we received from instructional research. I became the project director. However, the grant was also going to hire a project coordinator, and Lark Sontag, she's on as well, and I'll let her add when I'm done what she has been doing. Unfortunately, we were just getting moving. We were just, we did the job descriptions for the coordinator, and we had to go through all that with HR. The way we were subsidizing tuition is we're a small school. We only are licensed for 45. We're a 2-year community college. And so we were going to open the 3rd classroom. We only have 2 classrooms, and we were going to open that 3rd classroom, so it would allow us 15 more children. And we would have these 15 children spread throughout the center that would just have tuition-free childcare. And that's how we were going about it. We didn't have a budgeted amount for tuition. So the CCAMPIS grant is paying for the teacher. So that allows us to bring more children into our center. Some of the other objectives that we asked for and that we received was to expand hours of our operation. We do not have any evening hours. We did at one time years ago, and then Saturdays. So that was part of the CCAMPIS. We're going to open on Saturdays. We're going to strengthen parent-family activities through new curricula and workshops to help parents better learn, support learning in the classroom and expand learning at home. We expand our professional development for our teachers and our student teachers. we're a learning laboratory school. And also improved technology for the faculty and students. Luckily we're able to get some iPads and things and smart boards and things. And then we're also just improving our recreational areas and classroom resources. So those are some of the objectives that we are going to, our goal is. We unfortunately, as I said, we were just in the midst, Lark set a precedent where she was actually hired online because they weren't going, because as of March 30th, she was supposed to be hired March 20th, and March 13th, we closed down. So I pleaded with HR and got her on board. So she's been doing everything via electronically and things like that. So we were just in the midst of hiring a teacher. We were in the midst of interviewing, and everything just stopped. We were just, as I said, we just started to roll, and we stopped. So we're at that point now. We did our first report that we sent. So I'm gonna let Lark come in and tell you a little bit what she's been doing. So we're just getting ready at this point. There's nothing else we could do. Lark, are you there?
Yes, I am. It's great to listen to everyone here and to figure out, to see what you guys are doing and to see what what me and Sally are doing correctly. One of the things, we're using this time to really kind of beef up our relationship with the Student Success Center, which is kind of like, for students who are first generation students, and the financial aid department, and try to figure out how we can reach those students even during the summer. The parents that will be part of the campus program. We're building up our website, our part of our website that has to do with parental engagement. We're actually having, getting ready to have classes on Zoom, getting ready to have, try to set up a parenting group so that people can have support that are not just us. I got a lot of great advice from yesterday's the parent helping parents gain control of their career and their life. Remember, I don't know if you guys were there at that other session that I went to, and it was great. Like teaching children, not to teaching children, but teaching or supporting parents in regards to getting social capital and getting mentors in the professional world. So I all thought those were all amazing ideas that we're going to really try to implement. So, but Sally said pretty much a lot of things that we're already doing, but thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Lark, and thank you, Sally. As you start on this virtual journey, I think that eventually it will turn around. Okay, so I'm looking at the time. It's 8:46. I actually skipped a slide, which is the Sac State story. So I'm going to, make this presentation available later, but basically I'll focus on the data piece of how we got our award. And thank you so much to the other universities who've shared. We're going to keep this conversation going after this presentation. So when Sac State, when we first tried to apply for the CCAMPIS grant, I realized we didn't have any of the data. So it took us a year to basically go back to the drawing board and get the data. It was very political to get data. And basically my message to those of you who don't have the grant yet is I had to scrap it out. I had to find the data. It was not easy to get. I do have access to individual student academic records, but I was asking the financial aid director for data. And I think Autumn Green is on the line. And I saw Autumn Green at a conference, and she told me basically push for that number. You should be able to have it, and they have it, and it's just political. So thank you, Autumn. You're going to need to know the percent or the number of students at your campus who get financial, who are Pell eligible. That is what the whole grant is based on. And we actually enacted the Family Friendly Campus Toolkit, which really helped a lot. It helped us get basically a sense of their student parents' isolation, if they were working. And then I worked with some faculty who were a part of our family-friendly campus task force, and they helped me get data from the county and campus data that looked at, in our Office of Institutional Research as well. And we looked at where are those student parents concentrated at Sacramento State. They're more in the, arts and letters than they are in math and sciences. They looked at average age, marital status, GPA. But there were a number of long nights and days when I was applying for the grant where I realized, oh, I have to find out how many childcare providers are within a 10-mile radius of campus or a 30-mile radius of campus, and what their availability is. And so I was on the phone, and there was a lot of scrambling to really get that data. So it became, the whole CCAMPIS thing has been very political at Sac State. And I would just like to mention that I applied with the blessing from our campus childcare director, but not a lot of input. So she was going on an international vacation, and she said, go ahead and apply. Here are my, here's sort of my projections for what I think will happen. We're willing to give this a shot for, to open the center on evenings and Saturdays. And here's what we think the number of students would be who showed up. And we overestimated how many students would utilize services. And I think Kara and Denise talked about this earlier. You can get the grant, but it doesn't mean that the students you think are going to show up are going to show up. And so we ended up kind of getting into political and ideological differences of getting down to the question of like, why are we open if there's only 2 students showing up? And I work in student affairs, and I think, well, there's 2 students here who need to study, so that's why we're open. But the Children's Center staff was really tired. And so within year 1, I just stayed in great communication with our Department of Education contact and asked, hey, can we do this? Can we offer vouchers? I know that wasn't part of the initial request. Hey, can we offer a day camp for older kids that is educational? And we got that approved. And so basically staying in touch, I think as things change, you have to change and adapt, just like right now. Staying in touch with your U.S. Department of Education contact makes a huge difference. And there's more to say, but we need time for questions. So, COVID. Haven't gotten a lot of guidance from the CCAMPIS office. I invited them to speak today. They declined. I asked specifically, this list of ideas here that's on the slide, I asked them if these were allowed, and I asked a couple other things too. They have not responded. They said, we're going to issue a letter, wait for our letter. So I also asked right away if during COVID we could buy laptops for, many student parents are single and their kiddos are in school as well, and they only have 1 laptop. So could we buy a laptop to help the student parent stay in school and get their homework done? I was told no in writing on March 29th. What about an internet hotspot? Can we buy that? No. But here are some ideas for those of you looking for different and creative ways to spend your funding. So first, this is not an idea, but request an extension in writing for your drawdowns from your grant. They will be approved. I feel certain. Vouchers and subsidies for licensed facilities. I think we may have to appeal to licensed in-home care providers. I had this idea that we could maybe try to persuade them to have a deal with our colleges. It looks like some people are doing online educational programming, but it needs to be offered to all CCAMPIS participants. Virtual parenting workshops, that's being funded right now. You may be able to use the funding for facility renovations or improvements if you have a campus childcare center. And if your state and county health guidelines say it's okay to be open, you may be able to operate your own day camp if the children's centers are full. And that would mean, you know, hiring staff, providing supplies, renting facility. So that's a little bit of ideas. Those are some ideas for COVID. We don't have a lot of direction is the bottom line. And something I noticed in talking with our student parents is, frankly, as the country starts to reopen, or there are, you know, childcare centers are opening, many of the students I talked with are reluctant to use care because they fear for their child and their own health and safety. And I'm a little concerned about this maybe influencing retention, at least for a semester or two. And we all know how that goes. So just like some of our colleagues were saying before, our students are time poor. They need our help. And I think that we can try to find creative ways to use this funding during COVID. They do expect, at least the information that I've received is they expect to continue issuing CCAMPIS funding. The next round is 2020. That was one of our questions. So thank you so much. Let's open it up for questions. And if you want to unmute yourself, that's fine.
Hey, Haley, way to go. I think there was a lot of jam-packed information. We have a lot of questions kind of already in queue. And there's been some discussion in the chat, and it's great. One of the questions that came up was about how your strategies, like about strategies for programming that now that the centers are closed. And we've talked about this. Stephanie's already shared a little bit about our institution and what we're trying to do for that. I don't know if people want to chime in more. You've kind of already discussed it a little bit, but I wanted to bring it back to surface that how to spend down the money if the people aren't going back to the campuses.
So I think if the childcare centers are closed, that's, you know, that right there, you need an extension. I would ask, I would do some research locally on what childcare centers are open. I suspect there are some open. Of course, if we're looking at rural communities or communities where there aren't as many providers, that's going to be a challenge. But there may be other providers you haven't worked with who have availability. It's worth finding those spots. And Slaughter is saying, I was told that unspent funds due to COVID will be rolled over into next year's money. That's what I was told too. So if you can't use the money, I wouldn't worry that you're going to lose it.
Yeah. And for anybody who, I know there's a few people who are on phones that necessarily can't see the chat. Stephanie Fields, who's from Ohio State, is our CCAMPIS coordinator. She shared that we are looking to try to do some type of summer enrichment program, contracting licensed teachers to lead some type of programming for a few hours a day to, you know, even if the kids are sitting on a computer, it's educational. And the parents are at least alleviated for a few hours of service. And I think Tommy might have shared this a couple of days ago. I think they're doing virtual babysitting. And Tommy, if you can correct me, I remember someone mentioning in another session that they were doing virtual babysitting and that we're trying to use funding for that.
You know what? I don't believe it was me. Hey, everybody. Tommy, Student Parent Center, UC Berkeley. It wasn't me, but everybody's bringing up really good points about these non-direct childcare-based reasons to have CCAMPIS in your program. So that's one thing. It's really good to see that. But as far as virtual babysitting, I kind of want to toggle back to the CCAMPIS funds being used for these non-campus providers in home care, as opposed to the campus provider that, because of COVID-19, has been shut down. So an example of that here at our campus is a subsidized partnership with a group called Brighter Horizons. And they do a program for our student parents called Backup Care. And Backup Care, there's a subsidized rate where student parents can have up to 60 hours of in-home care that's essentially emergency. Well, I think no one can deny that we're in an emergency, we're in a global pandemic. I'm saying that to say, recently on our campus, I had to lobby, and I wish I didn't use that word, but I had to lobby to, with other campus partners, to increase the amount of childcare by the off-campus in-home subsidy to respond to what happened with COVID-19 and our on-campus provider, early childhood education program. So the big point is that what I suggest, and I'm saying this to myself as well, is that if folks have this other entity off campus to provide for their student parents, CCAMPIS funds could, if the provider or the campus you're working with can't subsidize any increase in the amount of time, then possibly CCAMPIS funds could be rerouted to help supplement that gap between what it is that the campus or the provider says that they can't afford. And then another thing that lastly is really important, I'm hearing, it's really affirming for me because I've been paranoid on some level, to be honest with everybody, is the idea that these campus funds will roll over into the next fiscal year because of what happened due to COVID-19. This kind of use it or lose it, set in stone narrative that I know I came in with when we received CCAMPIS funding. So it's just kind of looming over my head. So yeah, not us as far as the virtual babysitting, great point, but just want to say kudos to everybody. This is a really good presentation.
Thanks, Tommy. I saw in the chat someone asked if we were, or maybe they said they are looking at increasing award amounts. That's something I'm thinking about. So we pay 50% of the student parents' out-of-pocket childcare cost. So if they are already receiving a subsidy from a state or county program, that's fine. They may still be paying $100 or $500 or whatever. We're going to pay half of that. Well, we have a few people still going to their childcare centers are open. And so I want to look at increasing the amount.
So I'm trying to see. Oh, this is a question that kind of came up, and I think we've had this discussion, and I don't know if you want to dive into it. The question was about with the campus childcares, how are you navigating priority slots if you're sharing those slots with HR and staff and making sure your students aren't waiting extenuously before they even graduate to get a student into that childcare?
So this is a big question, right? And each campus is going to have history of how the childcare center came to be and how it's funded and what the pricing structure is. And the grown-ups who are better educated are usually in a position to better advocate. And so I feel like faculty and staff will always try to have priority. At Sac State, the history of our center, it's been around for 30 years, is that it's funded through student fees. It's through the, at least partially. So it's through the ASI, and which is an auxiliary, and students always get priority. Now they don't get all the spots. There's about 250 spots. About 200 of those are taken by students, and about the remaining, 30 that are enrolled are taken by faculty staff. My quick answer to this is it's political. And if anyone is willing to advocate for the student parents, they need your help because they don't have time to advocate effectively. And the best way to do that is to build the family-friendly campus task force and to get student parents who are willing to share their story at their convenience. It's tough. Whew, we'll talk more about that.
It is tough, and maybe not in a recorded session. And Ann also just shared too that 80% of their slots are reserved, and sometimes that doesn't rub the faculty and staff and the community well, which almost makes you wonder if there's more reason to advocate for a student-only childcare center in addition to a faculty and staff one.
I think that's tough because the Children's Center in our campus goes through times where they don't have max enrollment. They go through, you know, the enrollment varies, but also on our campus, we've been looking at, I think over 5 years, we've been looking at a steady decline in students who have children enrolling at Sac State. And I don't know why, but it is affecting childcare center numbers as well.
That is interesting. And I think that could take up a whole nother hour of what that could lead to. Because does that lead to them decreasing the slots they hold for students? And then if you ever see an uptick, well, I can imagine that gets really difficult.
Right.
So somebody did ask about your student parent buddy system, and they wanted to hear a little bit more about that.
Sure. So we have a peer matching system where over time, as people are at Sac State, they get to be more comfortable. Many people come in and they're just insecure and they're isolated. And so I'll ask them after a couple meetings, and they get to know we're just there to help, do what Kara said, alleviate the time burden, advocate. I'll say, hey, you know how you were nervous when you first got here? Are you willing to talk with another student parent who's in your situation? And I actually started a group called Student Parent Ambassadors, where they can, I put them in a polo shirt, get them to practice telling their story in about a 1 minute, 2 minute pitch, and then ask them to show up when they can, which is not a lot, or do focus groups or panels and make sure that they're there if someone important is going to be there. But also on the little purple intake card that I have, there's just a box that they can check. Are you willing to be matched with a peer? And that's the most efficient way. And then I get student assistants to hand enter data entry into an Excel spreadsheet who said yes.
Perfect. I think that helps, somebody had mentioned some of the content we discussed earlier this week in the symposium about building social capital. And that's a huge way, because providing mentorship is a learning experience as well as receiving mentorship. As these students graduate and matriculate into the work field. So they're gaining more than they even know from your buddy system. I think that's pretty cool.
Stacy?
Yeah. Stacy is with us. Stacy's been on all week, and I'm happy for her because she has funding and no program yet. So they're in a really comfortable position, lucky position here at Bowling Green, I believe.
So for those of you who may not be looking at the chat, Stacy is asking, are there restrictions on who receives the CCAMPIS funds if they're maybe already receiving support from a number of other areas like county or publicly funded childcare? So Stacy, I'll just speak to my understanding, right? I'm not employed by U.S. Department of Education, but my understanding is no, there are not restrictions. This program exists to help students with financial need. The only restriction is that they are Pell eligible, which I will also say does not mean that they receive a Pell Grant, right? Because a Pell Grant is a certain number of years. You get 6 years of funding. And then if someone uses summer Pell, it will cut into their Pell amount. They just have to be Pell eligible. So that might take a little bit of extra effort to find out who is eligible if they've already run through their Pell funding.
And I think an important thing to make sure that, because this came up another session, with part-time students, oftentimes part-time students don't do their FAFSA, so they don't have EFC to understand or determine if they're Pell eligible, which could also knock them out of receiving any funding if they go full-time, right?
I don't know about that. I think anytime it's very Sac State. We have a huge amount of our students who receive financial aid, but we really push everyone to apply. Even if you're late, fill out the FAFSA, no matter what.
Right, and one tool, and maybe this is because I've always had to do these things and navigate the ed system, for those of you who are advising students on this, tell your students to always check on-campus living, even if they don't live on campus, because it increases the cost of attendance.
Oh, that's clever.
So their financial aid package will be bigger because on-campus living is a higher calculation than off-campus living. They're not checking to see if they live off campus. Small tidbit. So let me see. That was that. Oh, this question came up, and there, I invite anybody else to jump in on this one. Someone asked, how are you staying in touch with your Department of Ed officer? And I did put in the chat that yours officer just switched positions.
Right. So that's a great question. I learned from a colleague that you need to establish a relationship with your grant officer early and often. You don't need to bother them, but I had to determine, so the person that I work with through CCAMPIS, her name is Antoinette Edwards. I think she was Antoinette Clark. I figure out which one is her current last name. But email. So she needs the award number in every email. And it's a long, PSA, blah, 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 tons of digits. Just make sure you copy paste it into every single one. Yes, Anne is the one who just left. We don't exactly have a new program contact. We were given kind of a name in email. So I think putting everything in writing, Harold Wells is in charge. I have not had luck with him being responsive, but I've heard of other people saying that he is responsive to them. I think my strategy is going to be email, and you can see on the CCAMPIS webpage, there's 3 people, there's 3 contacts. I'm just gonna put them all in there and put my requests in writing. And I mean, my approach, my perspective is that they have been very permissive as long as my ideas fall within the general scope. They have been really great in terms of innovation. I think it just takes an innovating mindset, which is why this conversation is so important, because people are doing things so differently across the country. And we are in a space that tends to be more traditional, less innovative.
Yeah, the comments are kind of resonating that some people are having the positive experiences and some aren't, I guess. Luck of the draw, maybe.
Who remembers seeing in the grant that there's a national meeting for CCAMPIS in Washington, D.C. every fall? Do you remember seeing that? Because I reserved funding for a flight and for a conference, and I was so excited that we would all get together and talk about it. And then I asked Antoinette about it because we didn't use the funding in year 1. I said, I never heard about that conference that you have, that meeting. We're excited to come out to DC. And she said, oh, I've worked here for, 10 years and we've never actually had it. So Student Parent Support Symposium, thanks.
We've been here. Let's see, they said the N4C conference has a meeting every year. Oh, Autumn's here.
Autumn, that's what I need.
And Anne, you're mentioning advocating for more funding, and that's what we spoke on this at the very, very beginning. Lindsay Rachel Cruz from IWPR was mentioning that that's one of their initiatives, is to push for more CCAMPIS funding from the policy side. And maybe we could, I could always mention to her what we talked about in this meeting and suggest that you are all interested in more clear lingo in the policies that they're promoting. Because that maybe if they were more clear about some of it, you guys would have better guidance on how to use it in times like this. One question, and this will be our last one. Somebody, and I think this is a good question because not all campuses are even child welcoming, not just child friendly. Someone asked their concerns about liability with regard to having children on campus, especially as it relates to a possibility of the parents leaving them unattended. And this is a barrier for them getting support for child-friendly spaces on campus.
Yes.
This issue is what the question is asking.
So our So the answer is advocacy, and you need sort of, I think, two, and a long-term perspective. Advocacy, a long-term perspective, and a donor would help if you could get a wealthy donor to give some money. So our family-friendly campus task force and our student parent ambassadors have helped with a survey. The survey, one of the top 5 priorities of student parents' needs is family-friendly spaces on campus. And that's one of the ones we're trying to chip away at. We need people, space is political. We need people in high places to help us get a playground, make those spaces available. I think the other thing is educating the people on campus. So we attend new faculty orientation and give them basic information about what it's like, numbers, how many student parents are on campus. You aren't going to know who they are by looking at them. If they're late, they're not being disrespectful. Maybe they need different grading systems, or maybe they don't need attendance and participation to count for a grade, things like that. And by educating faculty, we can help them be a little more understanding when someone needs to bring their child to campus. That's part of it, and hopefully, yeah, there's a concern about leaving kiddos unattended, but honestly, every campus is covered from an insurance standpoint. Of course, it's a liability. Of course, no one wants children running around in a public space unattended, but your risk management office has information about if you're concerned about insurance liability.
Let's see, and thanks, Anne. She said, one more thing to remember about the keywords for the CCAMPIS grant. The funds must help students to enroll, persist, and graduate.
That's right. Getting them in the door, staying in school, and getting them to a degree.
Well, I have extended this meeting 15 extra minutes. I hope everybody's not mad at me for not making it longer. I want to thank you, Haley, for putting on this, like, all the work and while balancing, all your CCAMPIS responsibilities as well. It's a busy time trying to navigate all of it and then put the information for folks who are also in the trenches with you guys. So I think this has been as fruitful as an ending as we could have for our virtual mini symposium this year.
Thank you. For Slack, so maybe you'll need to send your emails to Jillian, or maybe I can get your email address from Jillian and I'll add you. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. I may have to add you manually on Slack. Thank you so much, Jillian. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome. And I'm going to share, I think everybody will feel okay with this, especially this chat, if I share some of the registration information so you have emails. And I think you all would benefit from having each other's emails. On your screens, you might be seeing some upcoming sessions that we will have. We plan on having a monthly chat from here on to try to keep these different conversations going as we continue on to this next year that we don't know exactly what, higher ed will look like, or childcare will look like, or anything's going to look like. So we've already set a date, June 30th at 3:00 Eastern time. We'll be working with Imaginable Futures. They'll be presenting and fostering a discussion, and these are all going to be community chats with you all, focused on parenting students and what you guys do. Additionally, we're hopeful next year we will see all of you in person here back in Columbus, Ohio, from May 19th to 21st for the it'll be the 17th annual symposium. So with that, we will make sure we get that Slack link up on the website, as well as the question and answers, recorded video. Everything will be up there hopefully next week. Yep, they said create an email list, stay connected, adding on LinkedIn, it's great. Yeah, I want you all to go enjoy your Friday. Hopefully it's nice weather where you're at. And Haley, you get a few more hours of restful time, so.
Well, thanks so much, everyone. We'll continue the conversation.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.